Well, here it is. The video on our favorite little blue tank engine. And today, we're gonna skip right over the intro where I would explain stuff and get right into the lore. And so, without further ado, here is my AU for Thomas. Thomas is a Furnace Railway G5, specifically number 51, built in 1915. During the war, the Furnace wanted to experiment with giving a G5 extended side tanks to allow them to pull longer distance trains without needing to fuel up on water as often. They chose number 51 for the experiment and started construction in January of 1915. The Furnace were intending for these new modified G5s to be mixed traffic engines, so they wanted the G5s to look nice and fancy while pulling passenger trains. So they decided to add dips in the running board for style. They had already added the front dip. Before they could add the dip in the back, the government said, hey, there is a war going on, so you gotta cut the science experiment and get this engine out of the works right now. So the back was built to the same height as a normal G5, which led to the buffers at the back being higher than the ones at the front. We will get back to that later. Thomas, or number 51 as he was known at the time, was completed in late May of 1915 and put to work shunting and hauling goods trains. However, in June of the same year, Thomas was caught up in a bombing raid not too far from Barrow. He was pulling a goods train at the time and decided to make a mad dash for Barrow Station, attempting to hide out there for safety. However, as he was entering, he found that it was not safe at all, as German Zeppelins were still above him, so he kept going. He made it to the Victorstown Bridge, and just as he crawled safe, bombs from a German Zeppelin hit it, completely destroying it. Thomas stopped at Victorstown, and his crew told the station master what happened. Thomas's goods train was shunted into a siding by another engine, and Thomas was allowed to stay the night at Victorstown sheds. Thomas thought his stay wouldn't be long and he would be back on the Furnace Railway soon, as he didn't know the extent of the damage to the bridge. However, after he found out the bridge was completely destroyed and the reconstruction would take 1 to 2 years to complete, he realized he was not leaving the island of Sodor anytime soon. The Northwestern Railway, who now had an engine stranded on the island, quickly put into use as a shunter at Victorstown, occasionally pulling trains when the other engines were out of service for any given reason. It was picked on by other engines such as 98462 and 87546, however mostly got along well with the other engines, becoming friends with the regauge double overclone Wexford Railway 440 and the London Brighton South Coast Railway E2, specifically number 100 being named Timothy Hackworth. In 1919, after the war, the Northwestern Railway shifted focus to things that hadn't been that important to the war, but now were. One of those things being number 51. Although he had been on the island for a total of 4 years at that point and had become a regular site at Victorstown, he still wasn't owned by the Northwestern Railway. He was still under Furnace Railway ownership, so the NWR contacted the Furnace asking him if they want him back. The Furnace's response was, what? As it turns out, the SFAR thought Thomas had died in the bombing of the Victorstown Bridge, and so they dropped the plans to build the modified G5s, had the next batch be built as normal G5s, replaced him with another G5, and wrote him off as lost in the war. The Furnace didn't want Thomas back, and so, after some negotiating, number 51 was officially purchased by the Northwestern Railway, becoming its number 1. He was sent off to Crowbensky work that same year, leaving the works in NWR Blue. He was also given a name, Thomas Bracey, after the man who was responsible for building much of the world's railways in the 19th century. The name was also symbolic in a way, representing that the NWR would be built into something greater. After the end of the works, he returned to his job as a station pilot for Victorstown. Thomas, although mostly staying within the limits of Victorstown, got into multiple incidents in the 20s. In 1923, he was dragged along the main line by NWR's number 4, Gordon, while he was pulling the Wild Nor'Wester. In 1924, he filled in for NWR's number 3, Henry, on a local stopping train when Henry fell ill. But he wasn't coupled to the coaches, so when he pulled out of the station too early, he just left the coaches. Thankfully, he was stopped by a signalman not too far from Victorstown, and he eventually got the train to his destination. And in 1926, Thomas managed to leave the yards by pulling a goods train on the from number 2, Edward. However, he lost control in the notoriously steep Gordon's Hill, not helped by the trucks pushing him down the hill, only being stopped on a signalman thrown into a siding at Maron. By 1929, Thomas, with some help from Edward, had become much more experienced at pulling trains. However, he was still a station pilot, this time at Knapford after the 1925 LMS agreement made Knapford the main station. However, in April of that year, a newly purchased modified Great Eastern Railway E72, who turned out to be James, lost control going down Gordon's Hill. Thomas, who was at Wells when James blasted through it, gave chase and managed to slow him down. However, he could not stop it, which led to James crashing into a siding at Crosby. Thomas immediately got to work taking the non-derailed trucks back to Wellsworth and grabbing the breakdown train. Thomas was praised by Topham for his heroic actions, and was rewarded with 2 coaches of his own that were named after his driver and fireman's wives, and the Farquhar branch line, which had been abandoned since 1917. Thomas got into many antics in the 30s, 40s, and 50s, such as racing a bus, getting stuck in a snowdrift and having to be rescued by a tractor, falling down a mine, and other stories, but those are for another day. At the outbreak of World War II, initially, the NWO engines were allowed to keep their current liveries, but after the Blitz started in 1940, they were all painted in wartime black, which they kept until 1945. Thomas complained at first, but eventually stopped caring after 1941. Now, remember when I said we would get back to Thomas' uneven running board height? Well, we are doing that now. In 1961, a cleaner had accidentally bumped into his controls, so when the firelight came and started his fire, Thomas started to roll out of the sheds in reverse, which led to him coming to breakfast in the Farquhar Station Master's house. Now, the damage wasn't too bad, however his back was busted up, so he was sent off to Craven Skate Works to be repaired. Workers who were looking over the blueprints noticed that the blueprint showed he was supposed to have a dip in the back, and so they decided to have it. So finally, after 46 years, Thomas finally got the dip in the back. In 1990, he would visit the National Railway Museum in York, meeting many preserved engines and double-heading a train with London North Eastern Railway V2 number 4771 Green Arrow. And today, in 2026, he still runs the Farquhar branch line buses 2 coaches, Annie and Clarabelle, always striving to be a really useful engine. And there is my AU on Thomas. This is actually the longest script for an AU video I've ever wrote at 1,564 words, second being Liam's script at 877. Now, before we end off this video, I do want to say a few things first. The first thing I want to say is, out of writing the script, we have reached 100 subscribers, and at the time of recording this, we are at 120. Thank you all for the support. As you may know, I actually did do a Q&A, and if you want to go ask some questions, go ask, please. I would like to give some more information about my AU. Second thing I want to say is that I will be taking a short break from doing AU videos, mainly because although I do like making these, I don't want my entire channel to be just about AU videos. Plus, writing these scripts and doing all the editing can get tiring. And I also have a project that I've put on the back burner since January that I want to work on, so stay tuned for that. And the final thing I want to say is that you might have seen the background for this video is different. It isn't just an image of an engine with a blue tint over it. It's a video. Video what, you might ask? Well, it's actually speed paintings of this, depicting Thomas pulling his coaches somewhere along this branch line. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.